Sheena Easton has her own music video. Why she has it, no one seems to know. Maybe she's just popular in 1981. What's clear is that the 70s have gone. Put your clothes on and I'll buy you an ice cream. Everything or Nothing sequel presents For Your Eyes Only. I'm Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. When setting off on revenge, you first dig two graves. Resting peacefully in the plot next to mine is my co-host Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards as we continue our pleasant fright over 6 Bond films that could be considered continuing sequels rather than standalone adventures every other month through 2022. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How's it going?
It goes. It's going.
Believe it or not, Mike and I did not consult each other over the dress code for this. For this,
well, we know where to go. So many buttons down.
Well, yeah.
1981.
Almost as if the shirt doesn't have a higher button.
Yes.
It's sort of like you get it's either right up at your neck with a black tie, or it's kind of just above the groin. It's like there's nothing in between.
There's no in between. And I have to tell you, my first question for you, I know you've got questions, but one of my first thoughts in rewatching this movie was they must have been influenced by television. I mean, we're still a couple years away from the A-Team, although some of this movie feels very A-Team to me. Sort of when bullets are flying, it feels very A-Team. But this movie,
way more people get hurt and killed than in an episode of the A-Team.
Yes, that's true.
And more than they usually happens in a Bond film. Yeah. This movie has a really high death count.
Scene in particular with that, but I got major Magnum PI vibes.
Well, I mean, that's it. Normally it takes a few years before, into a decade before you start to see stylistically what it represents. This is 1981, and you could not get a more 80s movie.
Right.
It's like it's figured out what the 80s is going to be.
So quickly.
In 1 year of time, they figured out everything that's going to happen stylistically in media in the next 10 years. It's fascinating. No, I hadn't even thought about television, but there was a time at which I think I thought this was a television movie. Like this was this wasn't cinematic Bond. This was like I'm talking about very young here, before I knew anything about Bond film. For some reason in my head, I had it
for the violence,
except for the violence. I just had it in the back of my mind, watching this as a kid, that this wasn't one of the official ones. That this was Roger Moore had been doing it for so long, he ended up doing television movies. It's like it was a kind of like a Rockford Files reunion movie.
Yes, it has that feeling.
But
wrapped up in that, isn't it that they wanted to go back to form?
Completely, yeah. I mean, that's the first. That's really the first significant things I want. Yeah, let's do drinks, and then let's
to you.
Cheers. Mm-hmm. You're drinking a Negroni.
Yeah, I'm faking a Negroni because I have a Boulevardier that I was aging myself in a barrel.
Oh.
And I couldn't remember what drink he had. And
for some reason, all I heard was you were aging yourself in a barrel. That at night you just get in the barrel and then you come out 10 years old.
That's how I am formed. That's how this happens.
It's kind of a Jack situation.
Yes.
Mentally, you're 10 years old.
But yeah, earlier I couldn't remember, and I thought I remembered him ordering a Negroni, and I Googled it and I said, what drinks does James Bond order in For Your Eyes Only? And Negroni came up.
I think I mean, you're in the right region, aren't you? Because
Right.
we're in Cortina for a period.
We're in Cortina. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, even if it doesn't in the film, and I bet he does, you're geographically spot on with your drink choice. And speaking of which, I've got my
too, obviously.
This is my ouzo, it's ouzo over ice, nice. Which Bond orders during his dinner with Christatos in Greece. And just as the film is a loose interpretation of the Ian Fleming short story it tells a title with, I'm going to call the reaction of the ouzo to the ice mixing. So this is a cocktail, but a very loose definition of one. I like to have something to snack on while we talk, and
yes,
also have pistachios to eat. However, because I can't afford the emergency dental work it would require, I'm going to forego cracking the shell in my mouth and simply do it by hand, like everyone in the world.
Like everyone on Earth has,
Topol.
Except for Topol.
And just for those, you know, if anyone hasn't seen the movie, Topol eats pistachios throughout the movie, and so does a parrot. Let's just get that out there. But there's both a human and an animal consuming pistachios in this movie. But he takes the entire nut in his mouth with the shell, cracks it with his teeth, and then spits it all into his hand. I don't know how he knows what's nut and what's shell when he eats it.
Including when he's being a sneak thief and
right. Well, that's the only time it ever makes sense, right?
Yes.
He uses it. He throws some pistachio shells and nuts, basically whatever came out of his mouth.
Right.
His pistachio dribble.
He uses it like Tom Cruise uses a light bulb in Mission Impossible.
Right. And and then he hears some henchmen coming because they step on the pistachio shells. So pistachios are, I mean, they are the food of this movie, consumed by both human and animal at different points. Mm-hmm. I would argue more of a MacGuffin than the actual MacGuffin of the movie.
Right. The
pistachios are more of a through line than what we're supposed to think is the through line, which is the attack missile system. So we're releasing this episode on April 11th, which is the...
Oh, wait, I thought this was a June movie. Was it April in Britain, in England?
Well, yeah, this is the release date of For Your Eyes Only. The For Your Eyes Only short story collection, published in 1960, with the same title and
well played
titular short story that this movie is based on. And we'll talk a bit more about that later, because it might surprise you that this is a very literary forward adaptation of a James Bond novel.
Well, I think, as I understand it, after the sort of nonsense of Moonraker, they thought, why don't we calm down a little bit and go back to form? How about that?
Yep, and we'll circle back to that as well. That's literally my first note, that this is widely considered an apology for Moonraker. But I mean, it's not the only thing in Bond history that happened on April 11th. In 1954, Sri Lankan newspaper devoted its front page to a story about the James Bond books, about the publication of Casino Royale. And in 1994, let's see if you can guess this one. What do you think happened in 1994 in James Bond history on April 11th?
Pierce Brosnan?
Sorry?
Did they announce Pierce Brosnan?
Flip that answer around and it's correct.
Pierce Brosnan announced?
How long have you been in that barrel again? Well, what's the other side of that equation? What has to happen before Pierce Brosnan can be announced?
So Timothy Dalton said, "I'm not coming back."
He resigned on the set of the Rhett Butler miniseries Scarlet.
Gotcha.
April 11th, he made the announcement, "I will not be returning to," which is interesting because not that we're here to talk about that, but it's interesting because that's not a lot of time to get GoldenEye together,
right?
And with a new Bond, right? Yeah. It's clearly they're still thinking that Timothy Dalton's going to be Bond in GoldenEye up until 1994. So they got less than a year to recast the role and somehow insert the new Bond in there, which is fascinating to me. I assume that that he said that they'd already passed the gauntlet about, somewhere in the middle of that License to Kill GoldenEye gap.
Right. That's interesting.
But clearly everyone's working by the seat of their pants, and that does not surprise me because it's the Bond series.
Right.
One uses time properly in making these movies. So there you go. So that's This Day in Bond.
Wow.
And I want to, before we talk about how this movie was designed to rectify the abomination that was Moonraker, let's talk continuity claims.
Okay.
This is fascinating.
It really is.
Arguably, everything that makes this movie a sequel happens in the cold open.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to disagree with that. But,
okay.
But I understand.
That's what I'm saying. Arguably, I actually, but if you're talking explicit references to storylines from other movies, that only happens in the cold open. And bear in mind, this is one of the few cold opens that has no bearing on the rest of the movie.
At all. Whatsoever. We're just ending a storyline because we have to.
Well, the impetus, there's a legal impetus to this as well.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Do you know this? I mean, I'll explain it regardless, but do you know the story as to what's really behind the scenes going on that necessitated this cold open?
Okay, now, is it the writer of Thunderball?
Kevin McClory, yes.
Kept the legal claim to Spectre and everything to do with Spectre.
Everything to do with Thunderball, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Which would include Blofeld.
Blofeld and Spectre, yes, specifically.
So Blofeld is in this movie, but can't be in this movie.
Cannot be called Blofeld.
Right.
And is never called Blofeld, nor is Spectre mentioned.
Of course. So that's why he's in the cold open and murdered magnificently. I must say.
I like how you chose murder, because it's a cruel death.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's disabled, does not help. It does not minimize the cruelty.
It doesn't minimize it. Also, the cruelty is not offset by the Looney Tunes type, like Wile E. Coyote drop sound.
Right.
As he goes into the big furnace, like,
yeah,
that noise. Sublime.
Well, but crucially, and this is where the sequel part comes in. This is not the last Blofeld we saw. This is Blofeld right out of the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Right.
He has the same neck injury. He's physically, we don't see his face. We see him from behind, but he has a...
Great would it have been if it was Telly Savalas?
It would have been absolutely perfect. He might have sounded less like Dracula also.
I have things to say about this cold open, but
I think I expected any second for him to go, pull the strings, and call Boris Karloff a cocksucker. But so that's a specific reference. This is why I bring it up, because it's a specific reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Right. And even before we get there, where we have the grave.
Yes, we must mention that. We must mention this movie. The first second of this movie makes this movie a sequel, because the first thing we see is the grave of Teresa Bond, whom we saw die but 2 movies ago in this series.
So that's what's really interesting, is that it's not like this is the next movie after On Her Majesty.
Not even close. Yet, I think and this is where I think I don't know what you're going to say about why the rest of the movie can be considered a sequel, but I think because of this cold open and because it starts with those callbacks to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I think you're conditioned to watch this movie as a direct sequel come remake of On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
Because this is the only time we explicitly talk about what happened in that movie. It's all allegorical from here on out. It's just visual character references, the general theme of revenge, you know.
Well, we talked about this last time in License to Kill. You know, you have the simple line of "he was married once."
Right. But you assume that, you know, the reason why he's relating to Melina's desire for revenge is because of his own deep-seated well, and that's also why the cold open is interesting, because that would work better if he hadn't already got
great
revenge.
For him.
Yeah, I was going to say, he sort of says, dig 2 graves. However, I got the drop on the guy who killed my wife, so what do I know?
Yeah.
I threw him in a chimney, and I'm fine. So and my only other sort of, again, and this is halfway between explicit and subtextual. General Gogol, fascinating figure in this movie. This is his 3rd consecutive Bond film that this character appears in. He's in The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. They call back to his office from The Spy Who Loved Me, and even the music that introduces him. Although now apparently he's dating his secretary. I don't remember that from The Spy Who Loved Me. Yet when he encounters Bond in the movie in the final scene, it's not clear that he knows Bond. They worked together but a few years ago on a high-level operation, a high-level cross-cultural espionage operation, and he greets him as if he's never met this man before in his life. And yet he leaves the scene as if he's one of his best friends. So I don't know what to do with this.
It's a remarkable moment, by the way.
Oh, it's the best moment in the movie, yeah.
I love it.
He gives him, it's beyond the Halloween 3 golf clap. He just goes, look at this guy. Yeah. This is my guy. I'm going back in the helicopter. So depending on how you read the scenes with General Gogolin, that could possibly be a reason why this is a sequel as well. To me, it's baffling that he greets him as if he has not just worked with him.
Yeah, because my other examples are like that.
Okay.
There are things that connect it specifically to On Her Majesty's Secret Service that just Bond never tracks it for a single moment.
Right.
You know?
What are you thinking of specifically? I wonder if we have the same examples.
Well, how about the bobsled?
Bobsled, yes.
I mean, there's no moment after the whole bobsled where he thinks, man, this is where, Blofeld really came after me. And then right after that, my wife died.
Yeah.
There's no PTSD. There's no remembrance. There's nothing I'd love it. I'd love it if, in the first time we see him ski, he'd just have a full-on panic attack and just be like, whoa! Yeah. And both mountain towns feel so similar.
Yeah.
Cortina feels so much like, what's the mountain town in On Her Majesty's Secret Service?
It is, now you've done it.
I thought if anybody would know, it would be you.
I know. There's too much going on in this movie. It is. Oh no, I can't remember now.
Now,
the real place as well.
Is there figure skating or a figure skater in On Her Majesty's Secret Service?
Yes.
Too? Right?
And it's Tracy.
She is a figure skater.
We see her figure skating. Yeah.
We see her figure.
She finds him having.
When she finds him in the town, she's figure skating.
It's figure skating.
That's it.
There's also, I mean, we might both be burying the lead in that there's a Contessa in this who is murdered on a beach.
That's true.
I'd say that's the biggest reference to Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Damn.
Um,
Yeah, by the way, all the murders in this movie planned by the henchmen, they're the worst planned murders ever.
how so?
Like planned murder by Dune Buggy. I mean, I guess they got one, but so I have to chalk that up for them.
I was going to say their success rate speaks for itself.
Dragging behind the boat. By the way, there's a lot of ocean. You don't have to stop and turn around. Oh. You could just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, that is the I mean, we should be probably looking out, especially in this era, for what is the Austin Powers moment of this movie. And it is Christajos, rather than just straight up shooting them both, 2 bullets in the head while they're on the boat and then throwing them in the water, has them dragged behind the boat to hopefully be eaten by a shark, and doesn't check back
after they're dragged over coral.
Right.
But also, Tom, I'm going to say, I don't think anything in this movie feels more Austin Powers than that cold open.
Okay, well,
it feels like it is a parody of a James Bond movie. At one point, Blofeld says, "We can do a deal. I'll buy you a delicatessen."
In stainless steel.
In stainless steel.
Do you know what that's a reference to?
No.
Okay. So you're pretty much there where you know, talking about the legal impetus behind this. By this point, Kevin McClory, who co-created Thunderball with Ian Fleming, had won his legal case to remake Thunderball. And I think even before,
Never Say Never,
and which, you know, in 2 years' time would be Never Say Never Again. He held the rights to Blofeld and Spectre, which which Eon only got back very like within the past sort of 10 years.
Right. So Daniel Craig could take over.
Right. So basically, that they wanted to fuck with Kevin McClory's ability to be seen as the legitimate creator of Bond media by killing off Blofeld.
Yeah.
Of course, they can't call him whoever they have as Blofeld, so he's never named. Certainly, they can't mention Spectre. So they added the sequence in, and this is partly why it bears no resemblance to the rest of the movie, because it was simply about, let's kill off Blofeld so that when audiences 2 years later go and see Never Say Never Again, they'll be like, well, Blofeld's dead. This isn't the real Blofeld. Maybe this isn't a real Bond movie. I want my money back. That is literally what they're doing here.
That's
with the screen time of these movies that only come out every 2 years. This is what they choose to spend the time on. But they were looking for a number of ways to. So obviously, this is a direct attack on Kevin McClory, but they didn't stop there, because they wanted to make reference to the fact that he was believed to have mafia connections. But they wanted to do this in a way that could not be traced back to them. So this is why they added in the line, "I'll get you a delicatessen in stainless steel," because in their mind, that's a way of calling Kevin McClory a gangster.
Wow. It comes off sounding like Austin Powers.
It comes off sounding like he's having a stroke while he's falling into the chimney, which who could blame him? But that's what it is. But that's also, I think that's a continuity claim as well, because what they're thinking in terms of continuity, because they're thinking that we can make people see Never Say Never Again as illegitimate because it doesn't fit into the Bond continuity. So they're thinking like 2 steps ahead continuity wise with doing something like this.
I guess, but once somebody says, "Hey, you know, Sean Connery's coming back," you're not going to be thinking about the cold open of For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah.
You know? So it's remarkable to me, all the thought put behind something that, I mean, it almost just makes it complete nonsense that's the thought process.
Well, I mean,
did they know Connery was going to come back at that time?
Oh, I mean, yeah, the beginning of, I think the pre-production of Never Say Never Again started, and they knew Blofeld was going to be a character in it.
All right.
And they wanted to delegitimize that.
Wow.
And that's one, but not the only reason why both the teaser, and I would also argue the epilogue of this movie, very much feel like they're from different Bond movies. I mean, they have obviously have no bearing on the plots of what you see in between them, but tonally as well. Like,
yeah,
it's as you say that it starts very cartoonishly, but the rest of the
movie is so back to basics. Let's not go with crazy gadgets. Let's you know, even with Roger Moore, who's obviously more urbane than other Bonds, who, you know, he's still kicking that car over the cliff,
right?
You know,
and these were very specific choices to make the movie darker and grittier, and specifically darkening the characterization of Roger Moore's Bond. I mean, he fought,
like, give him some place to go.
Right. He fought very early on to distance himself from the kind of sadistic undertones of Sean Connery's performance, because they kept writing Bond as if it was still played by Sean Connery, and he said, you know,
you said before, stop doing that.
Stop having me slapping women on beds. That's not me. And yet this was this was something that he and John Glenn talked about on set. It's like, do we at this moment our Bond could kill someone.
He didn't want to do it, but I think, as I understand it, John Glenn
he convinced him that it would be more interesting if we added a note of mystery to the character. Like, what's he going to do? Like, how is he going to react in each situation? And it works very well. And I'd say it fits very well in the movie that is about moral ambiguities. Like, well, you're not clear who it's like, there's one of the few Bond movies where you're not clear who the villain is. You're not clear who the hero is, or the ally, I guess. You know Bond is the hero, but you don't know who's Bond's ally and who's the villain that's working against them. And an ending
telling tales about the others. So
it's Christatos or Colombo. It's just it's Bond's judgment call. He has to make it in the moment, which is a thrilling scene, because you as the audience don't know who's the villain and who's not at that point.
I feel like I do, but
that's only because you've seen Last Crusade. Because Donovan has exactly the same villain arc as
completely.
This is a rehearsal for Donovan by Julia Glover.
And didn't they want him as James Bond at one point?
Yeah, I believe that's true.
But he was too young, and then he became too old, and so they made him the baddie.
Yeah, I don't know really what that means when you're replacing you might be replacing Roger Moore, but
that's the other thing in this movie. I mean, there are moments in this movie where Roger Moore is doing something in which he looks in his head as though he's saying, "Oh God." And he's got 2 more Bond films to do after this one, Well, we talked when we did our No Time to Digest episode about Daniel Craig and how he's looking his age. He's looking like he's over 50, and he's not as he just doesn't look as spry. And I could totally see that with Roger Moore in this movie as well.
But it's interesting you bring that up, because I think this is the movie that first gives us permission to talk about Bond aging. In all his interactions with Bibi, the teenage figure skater, there's a moment at which she offers herself to him on a plate, basically,
Yeah.
instantly. And, you know, although it's not, again, it's not explicitly said in the scene, but the implication is, right, I'm old enough to be your father, maybe even your grandfather. So narratively, we're not going to show him
With her in any
with her at
capacity.
all. Yeah. And he says, put your clothes on and I'll buy you an ice cream. And
Right.
so it's an acknowledgement that you know, Roger Moore is getting up there in years, and we're trying to find a way to deal with that in the movie. And I think future movies either ignore that, or they make it a part of the storyline, of the characterization. So in GoldenEye, you know, he's called a relic of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig movies are, you know, they latch onto the idea, you know, it's a young man's game. In Skyfall, and obviously No Time to Die, you know, the knee that still works. I'll shoot you in the knee that still works. But crucially, as you said, the next two Roger Moore films have no acknowledgement of the fact that he's actually even older than this.
Yeah. But also, I find it interesting, and I don't know if it was ever if there was ever a plan for him to be with BB in this movie. But I know that it was Roger Moore saying that's pushing the bounds of good taste, where she's literally a teenager.
Right.
And at my age, that's not appropriate. But Melina, Carol Bouquet, he is 30. She's like 23 or 24 at the time. And he is 30 years older than her. So
she carries herself as older, but it's not an excuse, but she doesn't read that young.
But it's just funny that was on their minds. Where this is not okay, but this way we're okay with it.
Well, it's complete, and it only applies to Roger Moore's Bond in this movie. The rest of the male cast can do what the fuck they want with this teenage girl. Apparently, she ends up with Topol, who's
around,
no different. Is the same generation as Roger Moore,
right?
She's kind of kept. She's kept by Julian Glover as a kind of a pet.
Yeah.
So clearly they want to talk about Bond aging.
There's some sort of role reversal there, where he's benevolent and super nice to BB at the beginning of the movie, and it seems like her trainer is the callous, hard pushing. You know, the woman is being terrible, and by the end, those roles reverse.
Yeah, and I think she's a sort of, we have a lot of fake. This is what's interesting about this movie. We have a lot of fake outs. Like the first time we see people,
you're thinking one thing, but it's another.
Yeah. And that's her trainer's one of the examples, because you think she's Irma Bunt, basically, from On a Secret Service, and she's one of the more sympathetic characters in the movie. And they pull this trick again and again. And it's where, like, this is a movie. This is interestingly the main body of the movie, right? Post disabled man chimney death and pre Margaret Thatcher making love to a parrot. This movie.
I forgot about Margaret Thatcher, by the way.
We all tried to. I just think it's in a different movie. I can never remember it's in this movie. It's scarring.
Well, because
I remember it happened. I just don't remember it being attached to such a like a competently made thriller.
Right. I have a note here. You know, when but by the way, why is M not in this movie?
Bernard Lee had died.
And so they just couldn't imagine recasting?
Well, it's fairly clear to see what's happening is that every British character actor of a certain age is screen testing for the role in this movie.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, how many alternate M's do we have in this movie?
Exactly.
There's three of them in the first scene. That's when they're reporting about what happened on the boat with the attack machine. It's like two new M's burst into the room, and you can see they're both like looking at each other, going, "Don't give it to this guy, give it to me."
But I have this note that says, because they mentioned the Prime Minister at the beginning, and then they mention either she or her. Or, something. And I thought, oh, I got to ask Tom about that. That's interesting. They're clearly adding real life to this. They must be talking about Thatcher. And I completely forgot that she was
just talking
an appearance at the end of this movie.
That's it. I mean, you know, we've done the Naked Gun movies on the podcast, and the final scene movie is a scene straight out of the Naked Gun.
Completely.
Yeah. So, so where were we? What was I talking? What were we talking about? Oh yeah, I'm saying the main body of this movie is about moral ambiguity, and we have, you know, an ambivalent ending. Again, not usual in a Bond movie.
Yeah, right.
It's usually pretty clear cut, morally, politically, what's happened, and it's left on a moment of ambivalence. You know, it's the ending of the Maltese Falcon. Basically, you know,
sure, right.
Like this MacGuffin you've been following for a few minutes and a few minutes of screen time in this movie is worthless. You know, it's not good to anyone.
Yeah,
no one gets it.
Neither one of us get it.
Yeah. You don't get it. I don't get it. That's
which was completely satisfactory to the general. And I love that.
But
moment.
That's what's great. I mean, you know, and this is one of the ways in which I think they're working back Moonraker is that you feel the realpolitik of that moment of like, yeah, you know, it's like, as long as we're both. As long as we both, it's, you know, it's a very John le Carre moment. It's like, as long as we both lose, we both won. And I think, I mean, it's stunning. And I probably should say at this point, I don't know if you're aware of this, Michael, that this is one of my top 5 Bond movies.
That was my next question. I didn't know where this laid for you.
I mean, it's always a movie I've held in high regard. It's my favorite Roger Moore performance. I think the balance of humor and emotion in this movie is as good as it gets in the Bond canon. The action and stunt work alone would put it in the top 10.
It's pretty good, I have to say.
And also, you know, this is a thing, like the Bond movies, because, you know, for various reasons.
This is John Glenn's first, right?
John Glenn's first movie. I've got notes about that as well. So
he like became a professional James Bond director.
Throughout the 80s, he was the only man who made Bond films in the 1980s.
Yeah.
With 2 different Bonds. Because of stuff like that, I'm a kind of you know, like I've seen the Bond films so many times for so many reasons. And the ones that I keep going back to are the ones that have these incredible deep benches of supporting casts, this embarrassment of riches of character actors. And probably this and The Living Daylights are the ones that, where I just think like the cast is, it's just, like I say, it's an embarrassment of riches, the number of great actors and acting that's in this movie.
Yeah.
That's why it's my favorite. That's why it's my favorite Bond movie.
Well, when you have Julian Glover and then you have Topol, like, I mean, those are Hall of Famers.
Well, let's see. Let's look at the supporting cast. You've got Julian Glover rehearsing for Donovan in The Last Crusade.
Right.
Topol, an early Charles Dance role as a henchman.
Yes, I noticed that.
And by the way, you know, if you thought you were getting your Star Wars fix with Julian Glover alone, both Boba Fett and the Rancor Keeper are in this movie.
Sometimes you go down the cast list and you see a name and you're like, what, where, when, what?
Yeah, as a named character who's been in other Bond movies, Smithers, of all names.
Smithers.
So, you know, that cast is already, I mean,
that's ridiculous.
And then you add in the fake
have like Lynn Holly Johnson, who was a real figure skater.
Right.
She comes off exactly as you want that character to come off, you know?
I think Carol Bouquet does a good job as well. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, she's it's like she's in another movie and that movie is Zorba the Greek, but it's fine. It works.
It still works.
Yeah. Plus, you know, we've already talked about all the fake M's that are wandering around. They're all wonderful character actors. And they just, you know, they're obviously, you know, their response to filling the hole of Burnley was to just pack it with as many like character actors as possible. We've got a Sea Lord, we've got an admiral, we've got a minister, we've got the chief of staff. We've got Havelock, who could easily be a kind of M-type character as well.
Oh, speaking of cast, because we have Cassandra Harris as Lizzle, and that's Pierce Brosnan's wife, or was.
Yeah. He's one of the more incestuous of the.
But I think I remember seeing something where they said that he, came to the set with her, and they were all like, "This guy, he'd make a good Bond," like those kind of thoughts.
Yeah, right. If not in 1987, then definitely in 1995.
For sure.
Well, you mentioned that this is John Glenn's first Bond film. He's the only director who made Bond films in the 1980s. We've just watched his last in License to Kill.
Yeah.
So this is his first. And I was really struck at the similarities between this and License to Kill.
Yeah.
I mean, what he does in between is very different. So between this and License to Kill, and you were talking like View with Octopussy, View to a Kill, The Living Daylights. I mean, they're not. But this one, if you're going to look for a precedent for License to Kill, I would go with this.
Yeah,
because the story is about revenge. Once again we talk about Bond's bereavement, which we also do in License to Kill. The use of Q is exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
He's a field agent. Yeah,
and they look alike too.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Like
I do. Yeah,
there's something different about The Living Daylights. Maybe not so much a View to a Kill, but
Well, who knows what's going on with that movie? I mean, to me, that movie is cinematic drinking chocolate, but a competently made movie it ain't. It's an anomaly, whichever way you scratch it. But this is, all those rugged qualities you see in License to Kill are sort of foreshadowed here. And I wonder whether, John Glenn was like, this could be the last Bond movie I'm making. I want to go back to For Your Eyes Only and what I did there.
Right.
It kind of feels that. I mean, I don't know. It feels that way to me, certainly.
Interesting.
Yeah. But we also buried the lead here, which you brought up very early, which is that this is considered an apology for Moonraker.
Right.
Did that come across to you?
Certainly,
like the antithesis of what Moonraker is.
Yeah, it's the complete antithesis. I mean, it if not, I don't have the sense that there is any that there are apologies for Moonraker.
I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they knew what they were doing. They did what they wanted to do. Plus, it was a complete and total success. But they were smart enough to say, we can't keep going down that road. If we make it more and more and more and more ridiculous, then James Bond will become something that we don't want.
Right.
So let's calm our shit down and try to have something more akin to. I mean, it really does feel excluding the bookends.
Yeah, you can exclude the bookends. That's a given.
Feels like such a return to form. I mean, it's it's interesting because I find this happens often when I watch a Bond movie. It happened with License to Kill too, where I thought it was an anomaly where it's much different than other Bond movies. No, it's following the Bond formula completely and totally, except it's about revenge. I mean, other than that, like, that's it, But and I had that same sense with this movie too. As I was rewatching it, I thought this really just feels like it's hitting every Bond note, But again, just speaking about the influences, you can really see what was going on at the time. Obviously, I see a lot of Magnum PI, like they must have been interested in that. but also the things that are going on when we're in Cortina. I mean, I think they're totally latching on to Lake Placid having just happened the year before.
Oh,
because that's the year the USA beats Russia in the Olympic hockey game, and Olympic sports were huge, and I think that's why we have hockey, we have bobsled, we have skiing, we have biathletes. By the way, why does somebody hire a world famous biathlete to be your assassin? That's fascinating.
It is kind of, yeah, it's interesting.
And also, I mean, this is just a side note, but what was with that one shot where we started his feet when they get him on the boat?
Yeah.
They get out of the submarine and they're thinking they're safe, and it turns out all the baddies are, John Glover's on the boat. And then we're seeing Kriegler from toe to head, and we pan up on this huge package.
I think you've answered your own question there, Michael, the motivation behind that shot.
Between that and the how much of a nipple can we get away with in two separate scenes, it gave me very Modern Problems, Airplane 2 kind of, those PG movies where, hey, let's get a little boob.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that what you said made me think about something that I think is going to be representative of the Bond movies from this point, but I can't remember there being a precedent for it. Huge number of characters.
Yeah.
I mean, henchmen, villains, allies, all in. There's like 3 or 4 of each of them.
Yeah.
Co-worker. I mean, that I always laugh at the first moment that, like, not 1 but 2 naval officers walk into the minister's office to tell him about this boat. It's right. Like, and only one of them speaks. It's like, I feel like this job could have been done by one guy. And one of the pleasures of watching this movie, and again, it goes back to like the casting and how great that is you go, totally forgot that character was in this movie. It's like watching it for the first time, because I never remember Luigi. I never remember him, and he's delightful. Whoever that little proto Roberto Benigni guy is delightful. But it's like, this is, from now on, it feels like this is the sort of norm of, you've got to have multiple villains, you've got to have multiple bongos, you've got to have multiple.
So I'm trying to remember, like, that Octopussy feels like that to me too. I mean, that's
Octopussy is like probably the peak of
extravaganza, right?
I mean, I would say there's about 5 or 6 characters competing for the role of villain in that movie.
Yeah.
And in this movie, it's a good 2 or 3, I think. Oh,
that's great.
Yeah. But I mean, to go back to the sort of, I sort of agree with you. I don't think this movie was kind of shunted so Moonraker could be made.
Right. Yeah. They were rushing that out, right? They were like, hey, we're going to capitalize on this.
Yeah, because
come out just a year after the last Bond movie. Do I have that right?
It's still 2 years, but so they do the 2 year kind of. 2 years is the norm.
Well, for Roger Moore anyway, but I thought they rushed that one movie.
Well, I mean, that's the way it appears on screen, certainly, but
right.
They were making For Your Eyes Only. He even says at the end of The Spy Who Loved Me, the next movie is For Your Eyes Only. But of course, Star Wars comes out.
Yeah.
Cobby Broccoli remembers that there's a book with Moon in the title. So we're going to do that next. We're going to capitalize on the space craze. And so this is sort of, to me, I definitely see it in terms of both the absence of and the real world nature of gadgets. I mean, there's a very strong indication very early on in the movie that we've reached our gadget capacity. And do you have an idea what that moment might be? It's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Well, wait, are you talking when he's actually in the office or?
No, the sort of the moment where it's like, fuck these gadgets. Let's make him do things without gadgets.
Okay, wait. I have to really think now. No, go tell me.
So, do you remember the scene where he's, well, you know, there's a pool scene. He enters into a pool party with Gonzalez, the assassin of the Havelocks.
Well, yeah, because all he got is
crossbowed in his own pool. He's crossbowed in his own pool. Bond and Havelock meet, and Melina meet. He drags her to go and take her to his Lotus.
Yeah.
His Q branch Lotus.
Oh, and it blows up. Right.
And it blows up. There's two henchmen trying to get in and it blows up. And he throws the keys at her. It's like, I hope you have a car. And I think that is such a deliberate, almost I would say Daniel Craig-esque kind of fuck you to the gadget.
I also was watching some of the extra stuff, and they were saying, you know, because this is 1981, so apparently, you know, car theft was just rampant in New York at the time, and so when the result of the car blowing up was to kill the henchmen, apparently movie theaters would like stand up and cheer at
that's
that
amazing
moment, because that's what they wanted.
This movie understands the time it lives in better than any other movie.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, of course, you could also, and then the gadgets that we do see are kind of grounded in a way that they weren't in Moonraker, right? I mean, that's very evident.
He uses his own shoelaces to get out of a sticky wicket in this movie. I mean,
right, but you know, everything that Q Branch is doing. I mean, we get the visual gags, but what he actually uses is is it called the spectrograph, the identigraph, whatever it's called. Yeah, the making the face.
Early computer.
Let's call it the making the face machine.
Yes.
I love how it goes from like really terrible, really terrible graphic representation of that guy's face, and then when they print it out, it's just his photograph of his face. Yes. Like a perfect room. It's like that's not what was on screen.
That's not what
Why does the printout look like that?
I also like that in order to do it, you know, I was really cognizant in this movie of all the knowledge that James Bond has. He's speaking multiple languages.
Yeah.
He knows how to, you know, submarine. He can drive that submarine. You know, he can captain that submarine. He is in charge of cars. He knows how to do the Zamboni. He can do anything, right?
Yeah.
For some reason, when they're doing that moment where they're putting the face together, and he takes out that huge white kind of wheel thing, which he also seems to know how to use, this spectrograph, whatever.
It's like here's a laser disc of Goldfinger.
Yeah, exactly. And he's putting all things together for Q. And for some reason, it reminded me of like a sketch in the Muppet Show.
That's not hard to believe.
I mean, it really just delighted me.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the interesting things about this movie, one of the things I really appreciate about, and maybe this is a reaction to Moonraker as well, it doesn't mind slowing down.
Especially in those water scenes, I noticed, Tom.
Well, I've got something to say about that, obviously. But you know the make the face machine scene.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just slow down a bit. Let's just bring them in a cup of tea each. And, you know, it gets sometimes this movie gets very leisurely, and I really appreciate that. Like, doesn't feel like this movie's in a rush to throw out the next gadget or kind of
or to get to the next set
sequence.
piece.
Yeah.
You know?
And there are a lot of set pieces.
Feel like, let's get to the next set piece. That's a, that's a big thing in film today that we have to fight against, I think.
Definitely.
So yeah, like you, I like it when any movie and any time, allows that movie to breathe a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that's reflected in the direction, because one of the things I kind of noticed on this viewing that made it different from a lot of Bond movies is, and maybe this is John Glenn's first movie, he's kind of putting a stamp on it a little bit, is that he prefers suspense-driven sequences to full-blown action. Like right from even in the cold open, which is fucking crazy, but before the music comes in, we got to talk about the music. I've got my Rocky 2 everything sequel, Photoshop Rocky 2. We've got to talk about Bill Conti's score, but like before that music comes in, it's it's a real nail biting kind of sequence, and then later on in the movie when he's climbing a mountain,
because that's the one moment where the reason it feels like a parody.
Well, what about the mountain climbing sequence? I mean, I think that's
it's incredible. It's incredible.
Zero music, as it is in the cold open as well. That's what I mean. The absence of music is one of the best things about the music in this movie. And I don't mean that facetiously. I mean the moments at which they go, actually, let's just do this without music. Come across really strong.
The only time I ever had an issue with music in this movie was when they're showing the submarine.
Well, you know what I'm going to blame that on, right?
Come across screen, and then you have to slow down the Bond music for it,
You know what I'm going to blame that on, right? Fundamentally, underwater sequences do not work.
Don't work.
They compromise everybody's work. Okay, let's talk. We've kind of drifted there. Let's talk about music.
Sure.
This is one of the least liked Bond scores. I feel like we say that every time we do this, but and yet we recently did the Rocky series.
Sure.
Composed by Bill Conti, who does the music for this, in lieu of John Barry. I think, until Michael Kamen's score for License to Kill. It's John Barry. It's John Barry for the next few movies, and then it's Michael Kamen. So obviously, when you're being compared to John Barry, you're always going to fail, right? I mean, I feel like you're never going to live up to that. Especially John Barry's 80s Bond scores are the best scores he ever did for the Bond series, hands down. But I don't know. I'm one of the few, I think, defenders of this score, and I wonder whether it is something to do with our kind of Rocky, the Stallone blind spot that we have. Specifically for the Rocky movies, but I want to give this score the benefit of the doubt. I remember on James Bonding, one of the James Bond podcast, one of the guests described Bill Conti as a war criminal for this score. So I'm going to pull back from that, and I'm going to try and see. I think there are things about this score I really like.
Now, what are you talking about? Are you talking about instrumental music beyond the Bond theme, or do you like all the variations of the Bond theme too?
That's a really good point, and I'm glad. I don't think people notice that.
I noticed that more than anything else.
That is. I think when people talk about this, they don't realize how much Bill Conti has kind of reinterpreted the Bond.
Yeah.
The traditional Bond music in a really interesting way. Like in my head, sometimes when I'm the Bond music is playing in my head, I sometimes add a doo-doo, and then I go, that's for your eyes only. I mean, it's like I hear the Bond theme and then I hear doo-doo. I'm like, well, Bill Conti obviously knows what he's doing if I'm extrapolating that little doo-doo, it's like a jingle, right? But I wonder how much of it is
wrapped up in.
Well, I mean, we talked when we did the Rocky series, we talked about how Bill Conti's music sometimes is irresistibly feel good.
Yeah.
Like it speaks to that part of you that just wants to enjoy the music. And I totally have that here as well. Like I totally, when in the cold open, when the music, when his music kicks in, like the timing of it, like you know, it's one of the things that I can recall from memory of the Bond films. Like the cat goes meow, and then it goes da 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 da, and it's like suddenly there's an orchestra there.
Well, and what it
like
does
in the hangar, there's a whole orchestra playing this music.
Because when it comes up like that, I think it's jolting in the sense of you realize, oh my gosh, there hasn't been any music until just now.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know? And that's sort of the genius of it to me.
That is, yeah, absolutely. Like the timing of it and the way it comes in, and you know, it's just it's feel good. You know, it's like it just comes in and it hits you, and you know, you're excited about it. And you know, there are those interesting kind of riffs on Bond music, those little stings. I don't know what the musical phrase is, but those kind of stings he puts in from the very second, you know, the very beginning of the movie. As he's walking to his wife's grave, we hear this waka 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 waka, and then doo doo waka 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 waka, and I'm in, like, I feel like every time I'm in. I love this. This is great. I feel like he knows what he's doing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And you know, it's like, sure, it's not John Barry, but I appreciate that it's someone who knows, knows how to sort of put together a popular movie score.
Yeah.
Like that's what I feel like with this. What do you think about the theme song?
So Academy Award nominated, which I did not remember. And then upon hearing it, thought to myself, I'm not sure why.
Oh, interesting.
Not that I hate this theme song, but for your eyes only. I mean, it's like it feels Bond adjacent to me. I was really surprised when we watched A View to a Kill, because not A View to a Kill, when we watched License to Kill, rather.
Yeah.
And hearing that theme song, it just sounded so Bond to me.
Well, it's interesting because what you're saying about this, I feel about License to Kill, whereas I feel like this is
that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh. And maybe that's, apart from Madonna, maybe that's it. It's just like everyone has their own idea of what a Bond theme should be, but we all know it's not Madonna. But yeah, I mean, I think it's that sort of, if you look at it historically, from the Spy Who Loved Me through to, I mean, like, what's the first kind of, I suppose it is from Spy Who Loved Me through to View to a Kill, it's just all ballads. And that's not good for it to be all ballads. But individually, I like.
I think maybe that's part of it. It's as though I like the song, but maybe I don't like my Bond theme song to be quite this slow. You know.
And what do you think about? I made reference to it in our opening. I mean, no other time has the singer appeared in the credits, like upstaging Bond himself.
Right.
I mean, and when it's kind of funny because obviously Sheena Easton was huge in this period.
But I was going to say, like,
it hasn't lasted. Like, if you saw even up to Adele, if you saw Adele in the credits of Skyfall, you go, well, she's a classic, or Shirley Bassey, you go like, well, she's, is an established star. I get it. You want to brand it with that. And at the time they must be thinking, Sheena Easton's never going to go out of fashion. But she went out of fashion pretty quickly.
Yeah, right.
It was a bad bet, but it was a weird bet to make. that
And
this
I'm just
one
trying to
person.
think if there's any historical context of any other series or film in which, you'd see that. And I can't think of one.
For some reason, my head's going to Do the Right Thing. And
Really?
what's her name?
For a title song?
But that's Public Enemy. It's not as if Flavor Flav turns up, is it?
Yeah, right.
Although, if there's one thing that movie's missing, it's actually Flavor Flav. You put him in Sam Jackson's role, I'm not hating it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Sam Jackson shouldn't be in that movie. If that DJ was Flavor Flav, you want a special edition, go back on special edition and put Flavor Flav in there? Be my guest, Mr. Lee. Be my guest.
By all means. You all right there?
I got a hit of the. So far, the ouzo has been like sweet, 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 sweet.
Slow down on those
sweet,
pistachios.
Sweet. I know, and then I took a hit of it, and I was like, "Oh, there's the alcohol right there. I got the alcohol part of this drink in one go."
It was.
I want to talk to you about one specific song in this movie.
Okay.
Which is not the title song, and it appears during the pool scene, which we've already discussed. And it's a song called "Make It Last All Night" by Rage.
That I decided I was not going to take notes on the song because I knew that I would just write down every lyric.
Yeah.
And I just didn't. I thought that'll take too much time. I'll have to stop it and rewind it and like keep going. And but
go on. I have things.
I just remember honestly being delighted by its insanity.
Right.
Well,
but you know what the original purpose of this song was?
Uh-huh.
The brief was write a song that will fade into the background. We just need some music to and I was gonna say, I cannot think of a song that is less inconspicuous than this song with these porn lyrics.
This song is like if it was a 3D movie, this would be what's coming out of the screen as the characters talk behind it.
Yeah, that was the brief. It's like we want a song that no one's going to notice, and I was first alerted to it by my former roommate Paul Cuff when I lived in the UK. He said, this is his favorite Bond movie. And he put this. He said, listen to the music here. I was like, what is this song?
Yeah,
and he was like, yeah, well, it's not innuendo. It's just pornography.
Yeah, right. But I couldn't really put my hand on what they'd be pulling from, because like I said, this feels kind of A-Team. It feels like this, it feels like that. They're drawing from this.
Especially that scene.
But yeah.
Almost, I would say almost like proto-Cinemax.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That stuff that Key and Peele parody with the twisting of the necks. That's what it feels like.
And I started thinking, was this a song that would have been on, was the Playboy channel on yet?
Right. Yeah.
Would it be something from that?
And that whole scene, it's just, 20, 30 bikini-clad women?
Yeah.
All and they're all focused on one man, basically. They're all
what I also like about
one man.
Because I was watching some behind the scenes stuff, and one of those women used to be a man, and they didn't know when they cast her. And when John Glenn found out, he said, "That's amazing. She's the best looking woman here." And everybody loved this idea that there was this woman there, and they all just they loved her so much, and she was such a lovely person. I just like that in 1981 or 1980, whenever they were filming, that there was that sort of progressive attitude on a film set.
I agree. I mean,
that's amazing to me.
When did Dress to Kill come out? That was about the same time, right?
I think that was 80. Yeah.
Yeah. And that could not be a more bigoted attitude towards,
like so far away from this. Yeah, right.
That's impressive. Wow. You don't often hear about Bond films being ahead of their time in terms of politics.
Exactly.
So I'm really glad that this movie
If anybody
accidentally provided that.
I knew you would.
However, would it have gone down the same if they knew that this was a man, that this woman used to be a man as they filmed it? Or did they know? Did they know at the time?
I don't remember the timing of it.
Okay.
I think they had already filmed. So, you know.
Was it like that Seinfeld episode? It's like, that's a penis. I thought that was, it's like, no. They're not eating salami, that's a penis.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's great.
So I'm gonna do my best Andy Cohen, and I'm gonna shift gears here. So would you be surprised to learn that this is one of the more faithful Bond literary adaptations?
For the center of the movie, maybe that would not surprise me, but
right. What part of, okay, this is a way of doing it. What part of the movie do you think is based on the short story? I think you probably know.
Well, I had like the MacGuffin, right?
No.
Oh, actually, that doesn't make sense. Because when was it written?
1960.
1960.
Like, what would you say? I mean, you know, what's the heart of this story, do you think?
Are we talking in terms of character or plot?
Character.
Well, is it the idea between her wanting revenge and them working together? Like,
yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. That's a short story right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's really this is a watershed moment in the Bond canon, like whichever way you cut the cake. And you will see from this point throughout the 1980s, I think before we get to, I think GoldenEye is the cutoff point. The Bond movies of the 1980s are the most literary forward of the Bond adaptations, like all of them. Well, maybe not View to a Kill, but
I was gonna ask.
I feel like you know, you got to put an asterisk there, right? It was really interesting. The 1970s was the opposite of that. There was no Fleming in the 1970s of Bond movies.
They didn't draw any from
so
any
little. I mean, you know, The Spy Who Loved Me was taken from the, you know, all it was the title. It bore no resemblance to anything that happened in the book. Moonraker obviously has zero to do with the original novel, which is set in the 1950s and about an atomic missile, not about Bond going into space, as if I needed to tell you that. Diamonds Are Forever, you know, Man with the Golden Gun, you know, so there's a like a U-turn here towards recognizing the literature, specifically the short stories, which I think is fascinating. Living Daylights, short story. View to a Kill, short story. Octopussy, a short story.
Yeah.
I mean, they're running out of books. That's part of it.
Right.
But the screenplays actually draw attention to what the stories originally were. And we haven't done that for like 10, 15 years. So it's kind of fascinating because, you know, it's in kind of a, but beyond that, we have, you know, this is the first appearance of a character who's only appeared in the books, which is the Chief of Staff.
Oh, okay.
Who is M's replacement. We have not seen this character in the films. And yet from this point onwards,
staff in many of the books or all of the books or
the majority of the books, yeah. He's a specific guy. Bill Tanner is his name. And then he's called Chief of Staff in this movie. And then I think it's Michael Kitchen in Goldeneye is Bill Tanner. And then Kinnear, not Roy, Rory Kinnear in the Craig films.
Yeah.
In all of them from, I think, Quantum of Solace onwards.
Okay.
That's Bill Tanner. So the guy who is, playing M, the substitute M in this,
sure,
is a character who came from the book called Bill Tanner, the Chief of Staff. Here is the Chief of Staff, and he goes on for, into the very last Craig movie.
Right.
To be, so, and also I can't help think, but there are lots of references to Ian Fleming in this movie as well. Havelock looks so much like Ian Fleming.
Really?
Yeah. There's a moment, there's a shot in this movie where he's at his desk doing some nautical stuff with the parrot there. And there is a photograph of Ian Fleming that looks exactly the same. And it cannot be a coincidence.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
And at one point Bond says, when he's undercover, he says, I'm writing a book about smugglers.
Yeah.
Ian Fleming. The Diamond Smugglers.
Wow.
His cover is Ian Fleming.
That's great.
So you might think this is like as far away as you can get from Ian Fleming Bond. It's actually closer than it's been for some time.
The Diamond Smugglers, is that a Bond book or is that something different?
No, it's a nonfiction book.
Huh.
It's basically he says, I'm here researching a book about smugglers.
Yeah.
And the book they're talking about. It's like a real book.
Great.
I mean, yeah, the detail in this movie is really, I think really interesting. One of the things that drives it. Speaking of detail, actually the lack of it, let's talk about the MacGuffin of this movie.
Okay.
The object that drives the action of the film is not the object that drives the majority of the action of this film.
Right. Well,
so, we're not chasing, like, the movie is set up
it directly.
We're not chasing the attack missile system, but the movie is set up as if it's going to be a movie where we're trying to find this missile system. But really only 10, 15 minutes of the movie are devoted to that. And the rest of the time, we're not chasing anything in particular, except pistachios.
Or the people who want it.
Right. But there's no awareness that it's leading to that we're gonna get there, right? It's the thing I find weird. Like, it's such, because it's established so clearly as a MacGuffin, but the rest of the movie is
right.
Like a good
also
2 acts of this movie.
Also, I'll say when Bond takes that thing and unhooks it from the display panel or whatever from the submarine, I do remember thinking, that's it? That little box?
Yeah, true. It is. It looks like it
looks like a toy adding machine.
Yeah. I was gonna say Atari, but same difference.
Yeah.
So you have any strong thoughts about, is that strange to you that, it's like the Maltese Falcon, but nobody talks about the Maltese Falcon for 2/3 of the movie.
Yeah. But it's funny because obviously the Maltese Falcon is thought of as one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, and the best MacGuffin in film history.
Right. And the thing about this MacGuffin is, despite everything we're saying, it doesn't feel like the movie's suffering from it.
No.
So So who cares?
Okay, no, fair enough.
No?
Yeah. Where should we go next? I
Hey,
suppose
you tell me,
we got to
pal.
talk underwater sequences.
Well, all right then. There's a few,
Inevitable. Go on,
I've
go
been
on.
talking about what this movie draws from, and that scene, one section of it in particular, and the poster for this movie in and of itself, it
Yeah.
does seem like they still have Star Wars on their brains. Because the poster with like all the stuff on the outside and like the, any characters or the things you're going to see in the movie, that feels very Star Wars or Indiana Jones,
Interesting.
And when that super secret, not so
Same
secret,
year as Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
yeah.
Go on, sorry. The super secret.
Anyway, when that deep sea clickety clackety sub guy comes in, there's a part of me that said, "Is this their version of Darth Vader?"
Oh wow,
Love
that.
Yeah.
I got to say, when Roger Moore died, there were two Bond movies were re-released into the cinema to raise money for UNICEF, because he was a UNICEF ambassador, as we know, to alleviate his guilt about pushing a Thai boy into the water in The Man with the Golden Gun. And one of them was For Your Eyes Only, and I still remember, an entire auditorium breaking into laughter upon seeing that deep sea. I don't know. It's
unwieldy monster.
Right. But it has that sort of feeling of like it's Robbie the Robot or something. It's like, we have this here. We've got to use it.
Yeah.
Okay? It's taking up space at Elstree. Fucking
it also
Pinewood.
I mean, I know we're not there yet in film history, but there's, it feels like it's supposed to represent sort of the Terminator of underwater walking machinations, like any kind of, it seems like it's the unsinkable thing, but luckily Bond is resourceful enough to stick a bomb to its side.
Right. I mean, I do remember, again, going back to my childhood memories of this movie, my dear friend Dave Seymour telling me, and I use this in my show as well, this joke. It's just an observation. It's a very funny observation that in the beginning of that sequence, Bond turns to Melina and says, we have a limited air supply, so speak to me when necessary. And yet he keeps making bad puns.
That's one of my notes for that scene. When the shark comes out.
Like, is this really a good use of your oxygen?
Yeah. I said the lack of time doesn't stop him from using his best puns.
Right. So think if he'd have like drowned.
Right.
He'd have been like, probably shouldn't have done that pun. I mean,
and also it just felt like it was longer than 8 minutes. They were in that sub a long time. It took a while to unhook the Atari from the rest of the submarine. Then she's whatever's going on with her oxygen, nitrogen, or what's their mixture? Oxygen and helium.
Right, for this specific part of the ocean, which was a little
that's a little crazy.
A little bit like, okay, I don't know if you so it's like every part of the ocean has its own specific mix of.
Yeah, it reminds me of Spear. I remember first reading that in Spear when they talk about, oh yeah, we don't have oxygen in this thing, it's all helium.
But this is sort of like, you got to have it basically says an oxygen martini is.
Yeah, right. And I just think it's funny because she smashes her thing. He is trapped under. Also, what are these suits they're wearing? What are these?
Yeah, it looks like the Life Aquatic
suits. These button-up yellow suits that
I can see a young
pant legs.
I can see a young Wes Anderson in 1981 going into For Your Eyes Only, and his eyes just opening. It's like, I'm going to make an entire movie about this.
Exactly. Yeah, that suit does not seem to keep water out. So
right. Well, would it surprise you to learn? Would it surprise you to learn that I don't actually mind this underwater sequence?
It absolutely would, because I have so many notes that said this must really bother Tom. This must be one of the origin points of his hatred of underwater.
But this is it. So within this series, I mean, I don't know, what's the opposite of gold standard? Because the
gold standard, I don't know.
Shit standard.
Yeah.
Is Thunderball. So all I
know that Thunderball is your like sticks in your craw.
Watching this, I thought, well, this is mercifully brief compared to Thunderball. I mean, obviously, it's slowing everything down because that's what underwater sequences do. But I thought at times I was thinking, well, you know, there's a suspense justification for how slow we're going. Sometimes it's like we're doing the cutting of the wires thing.
Yeah,
that's slowing things down, not just the underwater stuff.
But I also didn't have a sense of danger.
No.
You know what I kept thinking about as I was watching this underwater scene? I kept thinking about the abyss.
I kept thinking about the fact that we should be cutting away to what's going on the boat, where Kristatos is like, right. I was like, oh, when they come up, they're going to be so surprised.
How did they get on the boat? What did they do with the crew? Where are they? Like, what? Yeah. Like, you know.
So, but I thought it's mercifully brief. You know, it's vaguely suspenseful. We don't. But again, you know, this is a movie that wears references to other Bond movies on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a callback to Thunderball.
But like they wanted to do it right,
but they wanted to do it right, and maybe they wanted to sort of say, like, you know, again, like the Kevin McClory, another fuck you to Kevin McClory.
Like, yeah, I was just gonna say, just another fuck you to him. Right.
We can Thunderball better than you, bitch.
Have you seen this fucking suit?
I think that's probably it, isn't it? I hadn't considered that beforehand, but it's probably it. So one of the things, this is pretty much my last note here. Mm-hmm. What struck me this time watching it was melodrama. Like, there's a shot very early on in this movie. Melina Havelock gets on the boat. Her parents are immediately machine gunned to death.
Yeah,
within seconds.
I haven't noticed. Well, that was quick.
And then we sort of zoom into her eyes. Obviously, the movie's called For Your Eyes Only, so maybe it's as simple as that. But I was like, "Whoa, this is like, you know, this is full on melodrama." And then, you know, as the movie goes on, we make reference to Greek tragedy,
mm-hmm.
the death of Liesl, Ferreira.
Yeah.
Like, is this the most emo Bond film?
You know, I certainly get what you're saying, especially about that zoom in on Melina's eyes. But
and again, it could just be branding. It's like, we're in Greece, let's do some Greek shit.
Yeah, maybe. But there's something in the tone of it from John Glenn that doesn't make it like seeping with, you know, like dripping with goo to me.
Right.
And maybe it's just the darkness that's counterbalancing all of that.
I agree with you. I think this, one of the reasons it's one of my favorite Bond films is because it has that, it knows exactly when to be light and when to be heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you get that, you know, and that's like all my favorite. I think that's all my favorite Bond movies have some mix of that.
Right.
Like none of them are too dark or too light. So I think that might be it. I think, yeah, it just struck me as like, that's a weird shot to have in a Bond movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be because you also get the title itself written down for you about 19 minutes in. It's on the file. So between that and her,
It's
and
a
that
publicity
shot,
package for the movie.
yeah, exactly. You know, to me, though, that shot of her eyes and then that coupled together, it's John Glenn saying, "Hey, remember, that's the title."
Thinking about the trailer, right? He's thinking,
yeah, right.
what's the reel of this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the show reel. Interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss in relation?
I guess the only other thing, I mean, there one the one last thing I'd really like to say about this movie is the stunt work in this movie is amazing.
It really is.
I mean, that huge fight at the docks.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And the last storming with the rock climbing. And I mean,
I think the rock climbing sequence is one for the ages. It really is.
Yeah. That guy put his life on the line, that stunt person. I mean, he had to drop, I don't know how many feet with the rope just attached to his waist and was just kind of hoping. And he was still 350 feet off the damn ground.
But that's the thing. I mean, you know, 1980s cinema is always going to have that extra lure about it because you know whatever you see.
Right. They did it.
They did it.
Yeah.
And there's no better example than this movie. And I think this movie gets overshadowed by The Spy Who Loved Me because, you know,
this was higher for you than The Spy Who Loved Me?
Oh, yeah. I mean, overall, I mean, you know, in The Spy Who Loved Me, you get possibly the best stunt in a Bond movie, probably almost in any movie. You know, you jump off you ski off a mountain, and you know, right. You can even see on screen that guy nearly gets impaled.
I think it might be the same stunt guy too.
Yeah, right. But he nearly gets impaled.
At least I know that guy did some stunt stuff in this movie.
Yeah, and you know, it's part of the James Bond film legend that, you know, and the premiere, everyone stood to their feet, gave that a standing ovation and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of overshadowed what I think is some of the less spectacular, more robust stunt work in this movie. But every time I watch this movie, I think, why aren't we talking about this? Like, I mean, it's some of the best stunt work from the helicopter onward, you know, from the helicopter in the Cold War Open onwards. I mean, there's a guy like hanging for his life.
Hanging from a helicopter.
Going through a hangar. And then he does, you know, we do it again like 2 or 3 more times in the movie, but it's done. I think it literally is because it's done for suspense rather than showmanship.
Maybe.
But every time I see it, I think, and you know, when did Roger Moore die? Like 2017 audience or something. I remember them, you know, watching along with that rock climbing sequence, and it was full of, you know, it was like just people inhaling in and out, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's the difference. It's sort of like, you see a new movie, it's going to be CGI nonsense from start to finish.
Yeah,
this guy, you know, I mean, we know he didn't die.
What's great about that part of that rock climbing scene too is that it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where they let it breathe.
Yeah, they're in no rush.
Bookends, you know.
Yeah,
and so he's dropping several times, and that's just good shit.
I mean, it's just, you know, it's a bygone era of stunt work that just, but it reads so magnificently because we have nothing, we have no equivalent now, right?
Yeah.
To that kind of action. Yeah,
Is this for you Roger Moore's most interesting interpretation of Bond because you have that?
what I like about it,
Duality?
what I like about it is that it's recognizably Roger Moore's take on the character,
Right.
but toned down so that it doesn't feel like just Roger Moore.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of playing the notes of what's going on in the movie.
Right.
Right. He is, but you know, one
like
of
an actor.
right. But one of my, I mean, like, you know, and this is the major criticism of Roger Moore, and it's hard, you know, for someone who loves the man as much as I do, and particularly his Bond movies, it's really hard for me to sort of see past that. But the fact that there's a space in this movie for him both to do something like kicking that assassin off the cliff,
yeah,
and at the same time, you know, in the middle of a car chase, he does his kind of visual catchphrase of sort of, you know, he's half in the way, and he sort of turns and goes like that, and there's his sort of, he does that in pretty much every Bond movie, and I love that there's a space for both, and I think John Glenn, when he's at his best, understands that
he can allow for both. Yeah,
he can allow for both, and I think that's what makes it the. But you know, you sort of like, you see him doing straight dramatic scenes, and you just think, God, he's you know, like when he wants to be, he's a really solid character actor.
Right.
And you don't really get that, a little bit in Octopussy, but you don't really get that in any of the other Bond movies. But I mean, I'm not throwing shade at Roger Moore at all, because I think he nails pretty much every performance, and he's really good at sort of latching on to what the tone of the film was, and I think that's what's great here, is sort of like, oh, we're not doing, you know, fucking Nazis in space this time. Right. Okay, well, I'll act a little differently then. And I sort of feel like he's just sort of adjusting around what the film is. Well, again, until we get to View to a Kill, and no one knows what this movie's supposed to be, so no one, you know, Christopher Walken
doesn't care what this movie's.
Grace Jones is doing her own thing. But somehow it's, you know,
it works.
Rise of Skywalker. Somehow it works. So yeah, I mean, it's my favorite of his performances as Bond. I think it shows his versatility as a character actor more than any of the other Bond films. I really love, I mean, I know the cold open is ridiculous, but when he's in the cemetery at the very beginning of the movie, and that asthmatic vicar comes over and it's like, right. It's great. The first laugh of the movie, this asthmatic vicar, Mr. Bond, and he sort of he gives like a laugh line completely dry, and immediately you go, oh, like there's nothing in Moonraker like this. Like, you know, he's at his wife's grave, he's a bit more somber, and you're sort of seeing that in Roger Moore's performance. I'm like, oh, okay, this is, you know, if he keeps this up, and he does, until, well, let's end it. What are your thoughts, feelings, concerns about? So we haven't mentioned in this movie that actually maybe the MacGuffin is the parrot. More of the plot of the movie revolves around the parrot than the attack, right? Because the parrot repeating,
the parrot gives an important clue.
It does, yeah. And then, so the movie ends in, interestingly, for a movie that could not be more different in the main body of the movie from Moonraker, ends in exactly the way that Moonraker ends. With Bond having sex, everyone but M is trying to contact him.
Yes, including Margaret Thatcher.
And this, yeah, exactly. It would have been M, wouldn't it? And they've gone, I guess, to hide the fact that it's M, they get two celebrity impersonators to play Margaret and Dennis Thatcher.
But I mean, playing it for the broadest sense of comedy, you
Mhm.
know,
It's
which is interesting considering the rest of the movie.
considering the rest of the movie. I don't know what you. I mean, you already said that you'd forgotten it
Mhm.
happened. beyond, and you know, I sympathize. Besides that, well, like what is as the button of the movie? What does this do? Like, what is it? Can you just go? I mean, sometimes I sort of think
So the
the
thing,
endings of Bond movies matter less than the endings of other movies.
yeah, and the
So
problem that this movie has is that it's broad enough that it reminds you too much of The Naked Gun. But you can't blame that on this movie because this movie came out 7 years before that movie. So,
right,
you know what I mean? Um,
true.
but you can blame it for it feels like a stunt.
Right, right.
That I guess that's what it is that it feels like a stunt.
I mean,
one with a particularly great payoff. You know?
I mean, I suppose you could look at it politically and sort of say, as we've been saying about a lot of kind of early 90s comedies recently, that it's just, you know, it's just anti-women in power again.
Right.
I mean, you know, Thatcher is one of the great human devils of all time, you know, as bad or as, if not worse
Yeah,
than
and I was
Reagan.
just gonna say, like, you don't
But
she's not being played for the gravitas that she actually had.
But politically, the people making the Bond movies are probably totally in agreement for her. So what they're ridiculing is the fact that she's a woman,
Mm-hmm.
not that she is a, you know, Satan on earth, which she absolutely was. But
Now,
that's
I don't know a lot about her husband, but that was the broadest part of the whole thing. So was he?
well, like, but that's it. I mean, the joke is we have a woman prime minister. You know, how ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
Her husband must be this total fucking, you know,
Almost an
gibbering
invalid.
piece of shit
Yeah, exactly.
because his wife is the breadwinner.
Yeah.
I mean, it's offensive. I hadn't even really thought about it on that level, but it's offensive. Um, it's offensive on that level. But I wonder if it's just like a sort of. I wonder if it's like a Cubby Broccoli note of like this movie's getting a bit bleak, bit like the bit where they, you know, said that the Cold War didn't matter.
Right.
Let's just do like something we've done before. But it's it's sort of very. I think I mean I think there's that undertone of misogyny definitely
Yeah.
to it, but tonally it's just such an odd way to end the movie, and I kind of forget that it happens every time.
But I also kept thinking it probably got big laughs at the time, didn't it?
I mean, I'm guessing, you know, I'm guessing so.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, but I mean, you get the same in. I mean, to a lesser extent, you get the same in License to Kill. Like this, you know, we follow up a, you know, man getting burnt to death
Right.
with a lighter in, you know, a kind of very gothic horror moment with a fish winking and jumping into a pool and kind of, you know, you sort of like high school frolics. And an iguana with a necklace. You know, it's sort of like by 1989, you're like, this is the John Glenn playbook.
Uh-huh.
Look at all the endings of all the movies.
But this one still feels different even than License to Kill.
Yeah.
But
But then you could, you know, the other, if you didn't think about tone, you could say, well, here's, as you said earlier, it's like, you know, Bond is more relevant than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're actually naming the prime minister and her husband.
Right.
We've never done that before. But it's all to mock and it's all to sort of do it in a. I mean, it reminds me, you know, it reminds me of a show that was on British TV not at this point, but later on, called Spitting Image. You know, it was like puppet satire of famous political and celebrity figures. It was the same. It feels like the same part of the same basket.
Yeah,
it's just interesting, just very interesting. It's a fascinating movie.
Was I forget what was the Loads of Money, or is it Loads of Money or
Harry Anfield?
Harry Anfield.
Yeah, he was involved in Spitting Image. Absolutely, he was one of the voices. Steve Coogan.
Was he doing that by 81 or
no?
Okay, that came.
No, it was because Thatcher had only been in power for like 2 or 3 years by that point.
78, I think.
I think she started in 79.
Really? Okay.
So I mean, she basically tracked with Reagan.
Yeah.
That's the kind of weird thing is she was
Reagan
prime
minister till like 1990, wasn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, where do we go next? I have ideas.
You mean for our next Bond?
And you're welcome. If you have anything else to say, please say it. I have nothing more. That's it.
I'm good.
Oh, let's talk. Let's talk next steps.
Well, I'm in your hands, sir.
See,
I can't even remember which movies we agreed to watch.
So we've been having a good time.
I'll say.
And I don't want to interrupt that streak. However,
but you're gonna?
Well, here's the thing. Do you want to do?
Oh, so
right. Do you want to do 2 not very good Daniel Craig's back to back, or do you want to break it up? Do you want like a sandwich where the bread is not good but the filling is great? That's what I'm saying essentially?
Yeah, right.
Because you could go straight to From Russia with Love, and we'd all be happy as a clown.
Sure.
But then we've got to do Spectre and Quantum of Solace back to back. Quantum of Solace. I'll check. Quantum of Solace. As if Quantum to Solace is a decidedly more good title.
Or do we go through the 2 Craigs and finish with
yeah.
Those
are our options. I think we need to do I would like to break up the Daniel Craigs, and I would like to do
yes. All right, let's do that then. Let's go Quantum.
Okay. Now bear in mind, this is a movie that I think we differ on.
Oh, I know that.
But I'm not so far gone that I'm willing to not.
But just so you know, I'm with most of the rest of everybody else
at this point in history. Took a long time for people to appreciate movies like On Her Majesty's Secret Service and License to Kill. So I don't know. I feel like this has the same versatility a little bit. Well, anyway, I'm not going to prejudge it. I might watch it and hate it. I didn't the last time I watched it.
No, you're not going to watch it and hate it. That's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said to me. That's a
but I mean, it's interesting. We're going from a movie that is not really a sequel if you remove the cold open to the movie. And this is the movie that most people regard as.
Yeah, but you could say that about this movie too. So
no, but this is the movie that, though I'm talking about this movie, but this movie, the Quantum of Solace, is the movie that if you say James Bond sequel, this is the movie people think of. So we're not going to have any problems with continuity claims. We just the rest of it that is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But I'll you keep an open mind and I'll keep an open mind.
Indeed, I will.
And
I recently watched Casino Royale, so
right.
I get to.
Well, then you can test out the theory, the James Bonding theory, that Quantum of Solace is best seen as the second half of Casino. But that is the best way. That is the best way to think of it, not as a movie in its own right, but as the second half of Casino Royale.
What a reach.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
All right.
All right, yeah. We will
We did it.
we will return. That was for your eyes only, for your ears and eyes only.
Yes. James Bond for your ears will return.
And that's Deton. You don't get it. I don't get it.
Right. So you can expect us in June.
June, yes. We'll take a month off. We'll be watching a less than good
Tom knows what, but
controversial sequel. Listen, we are at the mercy of streaming services here.
yeah.
We have been I did, this is not the place for this, but we if you knew what movies have disappeared just as we decided to do them, you would be shocked.
And send us money.
Yeah. You would you would send a PayPal deposit to Mike Shantz, and in the note as to what it's for, it would say Weekend at Bernie's 2 parentheses HD close parentheses.
Followed by another parentheses, you idiot.
Why didn't you get it in SD? It was a movie made in 1993. Close parentheses. Anyway, we'll have a watch along, and if it's what I hope it's going to be, I'm still making, it's still free as of this point
right now.
If it stays what it's going to be, it could be one of our best. That's all I'm going to say. But I've lost faith in that. I've lost faith in the system. But anyway,
I something reaches a platform, it should stay there forever. What's this taking it away bullshit?
I don't know. I don't understand. That's not how rights work.
Yeah.
So why should it work that way? It's bait and switch.
Yeah, exactly.
See Shudder. They are the Barnum and Bailey of our of the streaming services. Anyway,
that's enough.
That's enough.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for our latest episode in the series of James Bond sequels.
Right.
You will see us again in June, and before that, you'll see us in May for hopefully Tom's surprise. What might be one of our best episodes or watch along.
We'll have to do another Air Buddies movie.
Oh my God. All right.
You'll know either way. If you see a bunch of Photoshop dogs, you'll know that the movie I want to do is no longer available.
There you go. Well, as always, if you have a comment about For Your Eyes Only, find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards, signing off. Say goodbye, Tom.
Terrible news. I think that's the first line in the movie.
That's great. All right, everyone.
Wayne Crowden.
Yeah.
If you know Lindsay Anderson's Britannia Hospital trilogy, you'll know Graham Crowden. Wonderful actor. Should have been the next M. Not that I have a problem with Robert Brown, as we know.
He's your favorite, right?
Yeah, narrowly, yeah, he is.
Yeah. All right, everyone.
As we know, I'm an idiot. What are you I like Quantum of Solace, as you'll find out.
I'll give it a chance.
Like the Trump presidency, I'll give it a chance.
I'm not going to leave America. All right. So long, everyone.